I started working with weeds as I was really interested in their disobedience and the fact that they're not controlled by the man-made borders that we would put on them. They are all about transgression. They're resilient and wild, and I'm constantly kind of drawn to these aspects of them.
Whenever you're ready.
Do I need to say my name and all of that?
Yeah.
Yeah? That's the bit I don't like. Okay, I can do it. Hi, I'm Gal. I'm a London-based artist. I work at the intersection of art, ecology, and social engagement. My work often explores plants or heritage sites that are embedded in myth and folklore and rich in history. So I've been working with plants for a while now. I was really interested in exploring how kind of plants and natural landscape connect to this idea of belonging, and how do we feel connection and familiarity with a place through its kind of plant life. And then I also started kind of using the same plants as a material in the actual work. So making inks and textile dyes from these same plants. So nettles are super nutritious. They are really, really rich in iron. They're like a blood tonic as well, so they really kind of strengthen the blood. There's something about this kind of connection. There's something about knowing, walking in a certain environment and being able to say hi cleavers and hi elderberries and hi nettles, and just kind of knowing their names, knowing something about them. So there's all these layers of just being here and soaking it all in. So I'm picking up some nettles now, and I'm gonna try and be very careful with how I do it. I find a node in the stem and I pick it up from there. Which actually doesn't harm the plant at all. It encourages new growth. Also really important to say that it's illegal and also quite harmful to uproot any of these plants. So the main rule is that you take just as much as you need or as little as you need. You don't want to kind of feel like you're in a supermarket. And you really want to find quite an abundant spot. This one's great. And not take more than 10%. The stinging is really good for you, and arthritis used to be treated with just some bashing of nettles onto the kind of inflamed areas. There's a lot of kind of folk stories that I've been hearing from people about their grandmothers used to kind of do that in the garden, just kind of get stung by nettles. My mom was a nature trail guide, so I always kind of grew up with a certain kind of plant knowledge. And then moving to a different country, plants were also a really good way of exploring ideas about roots and rootedness and movement between places. And I was really interested in weeds, particularly because they're disobedient. They'll cross the border that we put them in. And also the fact that they're these unknown heroes of the kind of plant world. A lot of more familiar plants were always used in more kind of local, national, cultural kind of storytelling. But weeds have kind of found their way to avoid these sort of narratives, which is why I love them. I'm fascinated by them. A few years ago, I took a herbalism course and discovered that all these plants that are just around us also have really, really rich histories of medicinal use, of kind of use in the home and in the kitchen. And I started kind of tracing these particular genealogies, which was also a way to kind of regain a sense of connection to a place, even if this place is about like transience and movement. So it's quite a rich world for me to explore, like on the kind of research and history level, on the kind of medicinal and the use of them, but then also artistically, like how they might be used in the studio as something that provides color. Mugwort is a really lovely plant that we have here. It's super, super aromatic, like just by kind of sitting near it, I can really smell it. And the best way to identify it is that its leaves are silvery on one side and kind of darkish green on the other. It's been kind of associated with nighttime and the moon, kind of the dark side and the bright side, but also because it's kind of associated with lucid dreaming. So there's a lot of people who would kind of take it for that reason. So we have all of our forage materials, the nettles and the mugworts. What I usually do is just let the bag kind of open and let it sit for a bit, just to let all the little bugs a chance to escape. With Weed's ink, it might look like they're producing quite similar colors, like they'll often produce the kind of yellowy, browny shade. But then it's also just really fun to experiment and see what different colors, different things might produce. So Mugwort will give us a kind of browny, slightly greeny color at first. And then what I'm going to do is add a little iron to it, which makes it into this really beautiful sort of purpley gray. And that's the really fun thing about this process. It's all about kind of experimenting with the different plants, experimenting with different times that you might pick them. They might kind of produce different color as well. And then kind of knowing what to add to them and playing with that can really give you quite a nice range of shades. Yeah. So we can see that we're starting to get some color into the liquid. And this is for me where the magic truly happens. And I kind of use that word very intentionally because I think this is very much about these histories of witchcraft and a lot of herbal feminine knowledge that used to just be around. So we're slowly getting more and more color. So the nettle is looking pretty good. We're getting like an orangey color at the moment. And the mugwort is a little paler, kind of orangey as well, but a slightly different sort of shade. Generally what you want is to like get it to boil and then give it 30-40 minutes until you really kind of get all the color out of the plants. I'm literally just squeezing in all the excess liquid. So we have a pretty dark color already, but I'm gonna just pour it back in the pot. And I do just want it to reduce a little bit more, so we're left with a really, really strong ink. And turn the heat on for this one as well. At this point, it's really useful to just know what we're working with. So that's a good time to like test the color of the ink or like the strength of it. This one is still quite pale. We're gonna add the iron that'll kind of strengthen it, but I'm gonna give it like a couple more minutes. And nettle. I am going to put the liquid that we have through a coffee filter now to really get rid of all the tiny bits of plant material that might be left. So we have both our inks now. You can see that they're quite different already. But what we're going to add is some modifiers to just play around with their color a bit more. For this particular print, I want quite strong colors, so I'm going to use iron sulphate. With this one, a little bit goes a long way, so I'm just going to add a tiny bit, test it out on the paper, and if I need, I'll add a bit more. When you add this stuff, definitely make sure to use gloves because that's really not great for you to touch. So I'm not going to add more because this is plenty actually. For this one, I'm just going to add a tiny bit. We have a smaller quantity and then give it a stir. Yeah, quite happy with that. I think I'm going to leave it at that. For the last part of our process, I am going to add a thickener to really create my ink. Thickeners are usually plant starches. I am using something called tragacanth, and that's going to give me the consistency I want. So I'm just going to add a little bit, give it a stir, and then add a little bit more. So now you can see that from a kind of very watery liquid, we're getting something a lot kind of gloopier and thicker, which is great. So it actually does give us a kind of slightly greeny, grayish sort of color. These are some other weeds ink that I've been making and kind of experimenting with what colors they produce. So we have some sticky willy or cleavers. This is white dead nettle, some daisy with like the plant material kind of in because I really like that. And some oak gall ink, which produces a really kind of strong black. I have some other prints here that are actually kind of test and artist proofs of the print that's in the V&A. I made an edition of 20 prints. It was the first time I actually thoroughly used Weeds ink to make the edition, and I was quite nervous about how they're gonna last and the kind of consistency among the prints, but they turned out quite well. For this print, I'm making a digital collage that incorporates different bits of imagery from herbal and midwifery books. These are all pre-modern illustrations. I was not really interested in these scenes, but kind of looking at the different kind of tools and vessels. So all of these little bits kind of found their way into the digital collage. And then for the first time, I kind of incorporated images from real objects as well. So this is a Spanish apothecary cupboard, and the shape of it is just incredible. So kind of imagining the jars and jugs that it will hold. These two containers are from the V&A Storehouse collection, and all of this made it into the final print. And then the process which I do on Photoshop is to kind of cut some of the bits and have a little play with them. I like that it looks kind of patched up rather than creating a new perfect image. There's something quite dramatic about these like woodcuts, and I quite enjoyed sort of taking these slightly hidden or unnoticed kind of elements within the scene. So just the kind of tools themselves and really sort of focusing on them. It's all about picking up or picking out those details that stand out to kind of retell a certain story.
To get like a real smooth,
Yeah.
they're literally like on top of each other.
Yeah.
Whereas I've done actually lower than that, so
Yeah.
it's in between these two.
Yeah.
Right, so that's good to go. And then it's
Cool.
pretend. I'm gonna close this. Yeah.
Ooh, exciting. Generally, I feel like I have a complex relationship with any kind of machines and softwares. Like, I prefer the kind of like DIY homebrewy stuff, but I'm trying not to be like too intimidated by this. So you can see all the references that are included in the design. This is the drug jar from V&A Storehouse, and this is the blue gloss bottle, as well as a couple of mugwort and nettle plants from early herbal recipe books. It's interesting, the consistency actually got better after a few days, like all the kind of lumps disappeared. So the two inks did come out a little bit more similar than I thought they would. They do really smell though, right? This will be the mugwort, and then this will be the nettle. Okay, so I've done my mugwort bit. I'm gonna move on to the nettle. We kind of don't really want big puddles of ink. And then I'm gonna use this Japanese Baron to just rub that. You can also just do that with your hand, but this guy gives you like a little bit more of a kind of even pressure throughout. And that's it. Bum, ba, bum, 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 bum. Nice. There it is. I'm really enjoying these kind of darker areas here and like the sort of shadow of the pot. Yeah, I'm quite happy with this one. There's a term that I came across, which is kitchen physics. So not from the word physics, but from the word physician. And that really resonated with me. So this idea of like the kitchen or the domestic space being a space where all this sort of magic and healing happened. And there's something about kind of, yeah, I don't know, operating within the domestic sphere. This doesn't have to, you know, it's not about like fancy tools and equipment. It's about having the things we have in our kitchen and really reclaiming that space. That feels really strong and powerful, actually.